Um, Good afternoon, evening. I don't know what time it is for anybody right now, but I appreciate you all being here. My name is Audrey Richardson. I'm the first year experience librarian at George Mason University Libraries. And I figured if there was ever a conference that I could use this kind of title at, it would be this one. So let's go ahead and get lit and get started. So first of all, like I said, I'm Audrey Richardson. I've been at Mason for about 4 years. Most recently, my role changed to being the first year experienced librarian, but I've been in academic libraries for almost 50 years, or 50 years, 15. I'm not a vampire. Anyway, but some things I like to share are that like Legos are my non-tech pastime. I'm really always ready to talk about Marvel movies and shows. And Allie, who is really the star of the show and the reason anyone comes to any of my presentations, my dog, um, super pride and joy. If you see me going like this during a presentation, I'm throwing treats so that she does not get in the Zoom screen. I know you would be totally fine with it, but she does, she's a ham. Anyway, figured it would be good to get to know me a little bit. But for this presentation, we're going to go through a couple of different things. So the context, so background of high school groups and programs at George Mason University, the aspect of collaborating with non-campus partners, the impact of like how that exchange works and what we learn from each other, and then following at the end with lessons learned, things that I have changed by having different interactions and different things pop up along the way. So for the background, I like to start with a little bit of a quote of you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. Something you might want to know about this is I was asked to be the high school coordinator in my specialist position, and I was like, I'm in academic libraries. I don't want to really work with high school students, but it was like, let's just try it. Let's take a chance. Let's see how it goes. And this kind of encapsulates that feeling of like sometimes you just have to take that first step and see how it goes. Sometimes it's great, sometimes you fall off the stairs. We just have to see what happens. So as far as high school groups at Mason, originally it started as programming as part of a Gateway Library. That doesn't exist anymore, but it was an undergraduate library. Um, and then it provided different types of programming to fit students' needs. It was paused due to COVID I think everything kind of paused due to COVID. Couldn't really have 80 high school students coming into a closed building or making sure everyone was up to whatever standards their school had, our school had, etc. Um, but you might be wondering, why is this important at a university? So George Mason University, our campus size is about 40,000 students. So that's a lot of students. And I like to point out that about 70% of our students come from Virginia proper. So a large component of our student body is already in the area to some extent. It's a heavy commuter campus, not as heavy as it used to be, but it's still pretty decently commuter. We also have quite a few pathway programs that already exist on campus. A couple of those are the STEP program, which is the Student Transition Empowerment Program that's put on by the first generation group on campus. And it's a program that makes sure that they are providing additional support for first gen students. We also have EIP, which is the Early Identification Program in Virginia. And that's unique to Mason, where high school students, like rising ninth graders through rising 12th graders, have opportunities to interact on campus that are first gen or first person from their family to go to college, etc. So there are already pathway programs to getting students onto our campus that interact in the high school realm. Last thing I'll point out is there's a program called Advance that is a partnership between us and Northern Virginia Community College. So they do 2 years at Nova, and then they're able to transition directly into Mason without any issues, or like all their credits are transferable, and it's a really easy pathway. The last thing I want to say is working with high school groups is marketing. It's showing them that Mason is a safe space. Mason is a fun place. Our librarians aren't scary. And they might be future students that end up coming through, and then they see you and it kind of spooks you because you've seen so many students and they're like, oh my gosh, I remember you. So this is kind of a marketing program to getting them comfortable, confident, and ready for college while you're also interacting with them. So as far as collaboration goes, there's a lot of working with partners that I was not 100% aware of prior to working with high school groups, and how that might be different than working with somebody initially on campus. Um, so for one of those programs that we have collaborations for, it's the IB program. So that's the International Baccalaureate. That is across the United States. It is an extended essay that they have to do. It's one of 3 required courses to complete. This program allows them, it's a 2-year program from 11th to 12th grade, and they walk away with essentially 2 degrees when they leave high school. They have an IB degree, and then they also have their high school diploma. Um, and then it's rigorous. It's like a step up from AP. And these students, let me tell you, they really challenge me in such a way that I'm like, I will go into an English 101 class, and I'm like, how are these IB students having these crazy research projects? And I'm like pulling teeth in an English 101. So it really helps with the pathway. Many of these IB students also potentially will end up in our honors college as well. But really rigorous program, really great. But they need that like next step of research. How it's worked in the past. So the first interaction with this was they reached out in August of 2023, one of our particular schools. We had a whole plan set up, which was great. And then the person that planned it left the school, which is always fun. So I had to replan it with someone else, but they were able to visit in December of 2023. August of 24, the coordinator reached out to me. I had a pin in my schedule to like reach out in August because I understood that, excuse me, over the summer, they weren't looking at their email. I wouldn't look at my email if I was off for the summer. Why would they? So I was like, let me circle back in August, but they beat me to the chase. And then they came back. So a new class of students came back that were now taking this class, because this class, I believe, spans over multiple quarters at the high school level. AP program is a little bit different. Typically, English and high school students are the ones coming from those AP programs because they have a writing component. That's not to say like a STEM class couldn't come or another class couldn't come, but that's who has reached out. They're doing individualized research. They're figuring out how to get data, that sort of thing. And it's a level up because they might not have the resources that they need at their school, because typically when high school students come in, they're like, I have 10 databases. And I was like, I have 900 plus. Let's talk about it. So the resources maybe aren't as vast. And I should also note that Mason really prioritizes open access, and I've done a search for a student and come back with 60,000 that were open access and available for them to use. So they are able to use things in a variety of ways. I did see in the chat that, does George Mason have dual enrollment classes? That is a great question that I would love to, I need to look into and come back to you with that. But I could probably see that as a thing. I know NOPA for sure does. But for the AP programs, it's just a leveling up. They want to make sure that they're using more options, more like just different sources that they might not have access to in their original institution. And when I tell you how much they love being like, I went to this section and it's in Library of Congress call number, like that's like a new thing for these students, because everything is genreified or in Dewey. And they're like, I went there and everything on the 3 shelves around it was right. So I ended up walking away with like 8 books when I just wanted one. Seeing that little bit of exploration is super cute, but fun for me. How AP has worked so far. the AP research teacher from a high school has reached out to me. They visited and then they didn't reach back out. I did reach out to them, but I didn't hear back. And I thought it was important to put this in there, that just because they did not reach out or they didn't come back doesn't make that a failure. It worked in that moment, and maybe something happened at the school. Instructors change so often in high schools that perhaps it just wasn't available and they didn't have the time bandwidth to get back to me. But I think it's important to kind of point out those things, that it's not always sunshine and roses. I think, oh, they keep coming back. Um, but yeah. Communication was probably the weirdest thing to consider when it came to working with high school groups. Um, their emails typically will go to your junk mail, and you have to like be on the lookout. I have a very strong like sense to just keep like checking my junk mail, especially in August and in like December, January time period, because I've just the time periods of when I've worked with high school groups of like looking to make sure that something didn't get like moved into, Mason has this thing called quarantine, or into junk mail. And also video conferencing options might be limited, which was like a really weird one for me, where she was like, oh, on my school computer, we like our school laptops, we're not allowed to have Zoom. We can't download it. We can't interact with it at all. It is fully blocked. So we had to have some workarounds to be able to have a Zoom conversation. Um, they were able to use Google. I said, great, but just something you don't think of as a barrier of just in this digital age of things. Timing is also really crucial. What's their curriculum and what does it look? What does our space look like? I had someone ask if they could come during finals, and I was like, hey, I really can't have 45 high school students during finals period. Did that later evolve into me being there with one of my coworkers on the very last day the building and the campus was open, because that was the best time? Yes. Um, but your space availability and what your population needs are versus your visitor needs need to align in some sort of way. Um, again, discussing needs. What's like the one thing you want them to walk away with when they leave? Do you want them to feel prideful that they were able to find something? Do you want to make sure they have at least one article or have found a book that they can use, or copy a chapter out of? Um, do you want to just make sure that they had a fun field trip? What are the needs that I need to make sure they have the information for to leave and be successful? Because for most of these, it's like a 30 to 45-minute instruction session, and then they have time to just like roam around and use things, and I'm chilling, waiting for them to ask questions if they need help. And then compromise. What sacrifices need to happen with the time provided? So if they're there for the whole day, we can do quite a bit. But I've had groups that it was like, hey, can you just do like 30 minutes on how to use your building, and then we'll go off on our own. We don't, not to say we don't need you, but we're going to go and look around, explore, have lunch, and then head back like 3 hours on campus. Um, so that kind of changes what information I can give them, what information works out best for them, that sort of thing. I might really want to try out some type of activity, but the time doesn't allow it, or they might be really gung-ho on something, and I have to be like, honestly, you're only giving me 45 minutes. That is not enough time to do what you want to do. And it's just like a balancing of compromises until either they give me more time, or they stay longer, or they plan a follow-up of some sort. So what does impact look like? I call it exchanging of gifts because I get something out of it, they get something out of it, the students get something out of it. Um, and it's like, how do you gauge impact with the high school group? What do you like? How do you know that they learned something? Assessment during a high school group is extremely complicated, of trying to either get something back or um, just it's such a small interaction, but also a large interaction at the same time. What could you even assess? How do you say something was successful, or that they learned something? So I tended to think about it more in the way of checklist of like visual evaluation of the situation. As far as the students go, it's like, did they learn how to navigate the library space? Like, did I get asked a lot of questions? Did they understand which floors were quiet and which floors weren't? Did I have to yell at someone for doing a TikTok by the moving shelves? Those types of things. Um, did they learn how to find items? Like after they asked the question or after the instruction session, were they able to find an item and be successful in taking away some things? Um, did they learn about building and campus safety? There seems to be a mindset that all like the campus is safe, but we are an open building and it's open to anyone. So making sure that they understand, maybe don't walk away from your $2,000 laptop and your $500 headphones, because those are the things that walk away the fastest, especially when the building is super empty. Um, Understanding, if they do go out to one of the food places, that if they set things on a table and walk to the Hillel guys, they might not come back to their thing on the table, and there's nothing that I can really do about it. That's when, campus police have to get involved. But there's like an understanding of like, hey, we need to be safe and we need to be cautious while we're here. How to scan and save. That was even a learning curve for me. They literally the week or two before my first group came in, they changed how the scanners worked. And that's fun. But we do have a flatbed scanner that has a USB port plug-in. So it's just like flatbed bookend scanner to USB. So I was able to get like school swag. I was like, oh, cool, you're giving a swag of like a USB drive. And I was like, this is actually useful. Like, I'm not just giving it to you for it to be swag. I love that you love swag. Um, but it's very much a thing of like, no, this is actually like, you need this while you're here, because otherwise I have to stand next to a printer the entire time so that you can even scan to email. So, great use of my time. How to get help. Um, Knowing my name when they leave so that they can, like, I've had students reach out to me even after they left asking if I could help them find some things, or they had a really cool article but they didn't save it the way I told them to. How do I find it again? Um, just how to get help, how to ask for help, and that asking for help is okay and acceptable, and that I'm ready to help them. I also like to have a a teacher's checklist. So the instructors that come with them, instructors, chaperones, etc. This one group that I'm thinking of in particular, this past year, they came with two instructors for the IB program, and they're two brand new librarians. Um, so do they know how to navigate the library so that if their students do want to come at a time that I'm not available, um, that they can tell them, oh, this is where you can park. This is how you can access things. This is where you can do things. How to use our resources so that whatever I have talked about with their students, if their student has a question later, they are able to answer it or send to me. Both are both acceptable, but giving them some confidence to be like, oh yeah, this is how GMU's resources work. I also like to think about it of engaging in community. Something I've heard a lot while working with high school students is or not high school students, excuse me, high school teachers and instructors, is that they barely have time to like talk to each other because their planning period is legit their planning period, or it turns into their lunch period or what have you. The trope of the teacher's lounge is not what it is now that it was way back in the day. So they're getting to hang out, they're giggling, they're laughing, they're making jokes, and they're actually leaving like as a more of a tight-knit group than they came in with. Do they feel supported and valued? Making sure that their questions are answered, making sure that they are getting everything out of it that they need. And also, do they know that we're kind of like bonded now, that I'm going to bother them every August, and they're probably also going to bother me. Um, I've had them, reach out later and ask other questions that might be helpful to their class. So just making sure that like we still have that connection of community even between our different places. Lastly, I have my own personal checklist, of course. Did I provide appropriate resources? Did they look at me with, they probably did look at me with like deer in headlights because they got there so early and I also got there so early. But did I make sure that they were able to find the appropriate resources and access them? Um, did I also engage in community? So one thing that happens is it's typically me and another one of my um, coworkers will just sit and like have a bowl of candy and be there if a student has a question or like, hey, I found this book. Here's the call number. How do I find it? And we'll like walk around with them. But the other thing that tends to happen because we centralize ourselves on like our what I call our loud floor, the second floor, is that other librarians and other employees will walk by and just sit down and chat. And you don't get those interactions that often because you're just doing your thing. So did I engage in some level of community on those days? Did I learn something new? Always. Those kids keep me on my toes for sure. Just like, did I learn something new? Was there something that happened that I needed to adapt for? Like first year, the Wi-Fi was like 8 steps to get the students signed on. So we adjusted to add extra time the next time. The next time they didn't need to do all of that stuff. So it's like, we adjusted and we adapted and we didn't have to do that and we still achieved. Recognizing growth areas in myself, like has my instruction changed? Have I been able to do more, or what places can I grow in this because I am new to working with high school students? So how can I grow? Um, and then finding the joy in this partnership, because I don't know about any of you, but by December, I am crunchy crusty. So like December and April tend to be when I'm working with these students, and it's after I have done 15 to 20 instruction sessions. It's the like days before winter break, and I have to like really go camp counselor and amp myself up. And it truly is a joy at the end of it to see them coming, like see students coming back in like a group all wearing like Mason hoodies or just like really excited and engaging in things. And like, am I finding joy? Because if I don't find joy, perhaps I should not be the person in face of this programming. So as you can see, the gifting cycle kind of goes all 3 ways. So I'm learning something from the students, they're getting something out of Mason, and the teachers are also getting something out of me and seeing how the students are engaging as best as possible. Lessons learned, always the hard part, right? Like we want to think everything went perfect, and it really doesn't. But we always have some lessons that need to be learned and ways that we need to grow. Um, and Dennis Waitley says it really great. There are no mistakes or failures, only lessons. Um, this kind of goes back to the AP group I was talking about earlier, where I was like, oh no, I failed. They don't want to come back. But again, there's so many reasons and things that could have come along um, that made that not happen. So I wouldn't say it's a failure. It's just things changed. As far as lessons learned go, understanding, um, a lot of times we don't think about what it's like for somebody that is not plugged into campus, like what it's like for somebody that's not plugged into campus to come um, into our space or into our building space, etc. We don't know what they might need. Talking about like doing the airline flight attendant of where the restrooms are, where they might find a water fountain. Um, if the door says don't walk through it, perhaps don't. But understanding what someone outside of the Mason community might need, what barriers they may face in using our resources, and where that might change things. Transferable skills is one of like the really great things that I've learned and grown from, and it has really helped me in my instruction. So, what can I use from working with these students and their instructors that can now be transferred to university studies? Um, so that's like the Welcome to Mason, Welcome to College Life class, um, English 101 or 302, or Honors 110 or 302. So one thing that I like to point out is I've learned a lot about what I've started calling the COVID shift, cliff. So a lot of people know about like No Child Left Behind and that kind of ending at ninth grade and then students struggling through high school. Right now, there's the struggle through high school, but there's also the struggle at the beginning of college where due dates were imaginary. There were some institutions in Virginia, some high schools in Virginia, where a student could not fail, essentially. They could turn in a GIF of a cat and still get 50% credit because they submitted something. They could miss 90% of the class and still turn in all of the work at the end of the semester and still pass. That was a new one I just learned about. Or, there's a lot of change in between what is acceptable that typically is learned a little bit in high school that has not transferred quite yet, because depending on where they are at high school, um, they just have like different things going on. Um, so great example. I taught you in University 100. It's a 1 credit Barron course. And a student was like, what do you mean I can't turn in every single assignment the last week of classes and pass? And I was like, due dates are not fake. They are so that I can get your grades to you in time. And I have enough time to get everyone else's grades in time. Like, they're not for funsies. They're real. And, and there are consequences. They're like, but I didn't have any consequences in high school. And I was like, well, what a great place to learn it with a 1 credit class. Those was a lot of hard conversations with this particular student, but just like having those conversations and seeing the struggle that the high school teachers are having, it allows me to kind of help myself and also helps instructors that I'm working with um, in our English department specifically. um, I will say that they have a lot of graduate teaching assistants and it's their first time ever teaching and they can't understand why a student hasn't turned in 3 pieces. And I was like, oh, I can explain this to you. You kind of need to be a little bit more firm in your class about when things are due because, they're teaching 2 English 110 classes with 15 to 20 students each reading research papers. That's a lot of work. And if they all turn it in at the last week, that's not fair. So learning this from the high school level of, oh, there are issues there that are now showing up freshman and sophomore year of college helps me work with the faculty as well as being a faculty at Mason for English Honors and University 100. I'm sure it is transferable to any other class. They're probably still struggling, but I don't work with them. So I can't help them unless I talk to them. Um, and then with lessons learned, some things that I would change for the future and maybe do a little bit different next time is something I've been thinking about that I've seen in literature is when students do come to your institution, you're taking them out of a comfort space. So making sure they're comfortable and have things, that's all, always a plus, always a necessity. But also you're potentially taking students away from like their food source for the day. So you see all the students getting excited because like I'm telling them like what all the food options are on campus, which ones are open and which ones aren't because it's the last week of classes or another time. And I'm giving them that information and someone might be feeling left out. So while I might have like a bowl of candy, perhaps in the future I would make sure to have see if anyone might want to talk with their class ahead of time to make sure that there are meals available or, that sort of thing. So they're also not like missing out on an experience that their friends are. Um, Other things I would change is making sure that there is more swag because they really love A, free stuff, and B, stuff that's like, look at me, I went to college for the day because they're getting a class release to come. So they like get a class release and they're coming to a college campus and they're all going back to school at the end of the day with their sweatshirts or, like whatever they've purchased. But making sure that they have some things that have like the library on it so they remember that experience. Um, One thing we did have to do this past year was like quickly order some USBs because they decided to order a more expensive USB for swag, which is great because it has USB-C and regular USB. But because of how expensive they were, they didn't order enough that I was able to use them for those students. So we had to do a little bit of digging around to find the old ones and then ordered some backup ones just in case we ran into that issue in the future. Um, I am running through this extremely fast, so you guys will get to have a little bit of a break or ask a lot of questions. Both are possible. With that, that has been my experience so far. That is what it has been like working with high school groups as an academic librarian. But welcome any and all questions, and you can put them in the chat, or I believe um, we'll be able to unmute as well if that is a preferred option. Unmute is enabled, so feel free to raise a hand, unmute, put it in the chat if you have any questions. I will share I wouldn't call it a failure, but it was more like me being in like, I am not a parent whatsoever other than to my dog, but I felt what's the word I'm looking for? Protective. I don't know if you all remember when Panera had their charged lemonades that were like basically they had to get rid of them because multiple people had died. And the students came back from lunch and they have massive charged lemonades with no ice in them. And I was like, if one of these children has a panic attack or a heart attack because of the math caffeine, am I responsible today? So that was a little bit of a mental breakdown that I had in working with students. But I was like, no, they have worked with. Perhaps that's not on the school, but those don't exist anymore, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. But
Hi, I can never figure out where the raise hand button is, but I have a question. So I've worked with a couple of high school classes this year for the first time, and I was wondering how you handle classroom management because that's not really a thing that we talk about in college,
mm,
like making sure people settle down and like don't throw things. But have you had experiences where you've had to like practice that? Do you have the teachers in the room usually? Like, how do you do things?
yes, the instructors are always there. Also, congratulations on your first time working with high school students. It is very scary. It is so much more scarier than freshmen. Um, but that is part of the conversation that I have with the instructors ahead of time of like, I am there to do my instruction. I will do minimal classroom management, but if it gets rowdy, I need you to step in because they know them. And I'm also explain to them, to the instructors, that I'm trying to make um, the environment one that they want to return to. Um, there is a little bit of wayfinding in the instruction that I do in that like 30 to 45 minutes of like, these are the levels of sound on each floor. Please respect them. If I get any complaints, I am telling your instructor, like there is a little bit of that. Like, and I always do it in such a way, like again, camp counselor, right? Where it's like, please don't make me do this. I really don't want to. I want you to come back. I love you all. You all are great. Um, and I make it seem like it's a burden on me, and they don't want me to be burdened with that. So they typically have already had like a conversation um, they typically already have a conversation before they get there, but then I reinforce it with what our rules are in the building. And I was like, we have a very robust chat service. If you are being obnoxious, someone will tell on you. And then I have to deal, but typically I go through their instructor because they are ultimately responsible for them. They are always in the classroom. That is something that I do even with classes that I visit that are the college core classes. I'm like, this is your class. I'm not here to manage or micromanage. Get your people together a little bit. Um, and typically the instructors have like put the fear in them so hard at this point that they are like afraid to giggle, and then I'm over there cackling and they're like, oh, I can be a little bit louder than I'm currently being. So it's a combination, but I rely heavily on their instructors because they have already made that full connection, and I also don't want to scare them from coming back. Did that answer your question, Linnea? Is it Linnea or Linnea? I don't want to say it
Linnea.
wrong.
Yeah, thank
Linnea.
you. Yeah,
Of
yeah,
course.
that's really helpful to hear. Thanks.
Yeah. Someone else asked in the chat, what other types of things have I taught besides scanning and like how to do that maintenance? We go over the building. We go over how to read Library of Congress call number system because that is very different than what they're used to because typically it's either Dewey or a lot are moving towards genreification. Um, I've had some ask to go over Boolean just to like reinforce it in a different way of how to use our databases. I also talk about our databases, show them how to, if you have Primo, I show them how to like facet it so that it only shows open access online for when they're at home. But I also show them how to find physical copies while they're in the building. Um, it's more of just like, it's like University 100 light. It's like, what do you need for today specifically? And then the questions kind of come in as the day goes on. Um, I write down 99% of the questions they ask, I write them down, especially if it's a unique one that might be helpful for instruction later. Um, so it's just making sure that they're able to access, use, and do everything within the building. And then if they need, and then also making sure like when they do exit the building, again, they do have some access to those open access resources and showing them how to use them. And we also have, I'm going to read this really quick. I appreciate you sharing this experience. I have similar sessions for high school, and it can be a very involved process to coordinate library, campus security, other entities, training for adult workers with minors. Yes. What kind of training for adults working with minors do you get? That's a great question. Not a whole ton, I will put it that way, but we do have a lot of mandated, so you have the mandated reporting, but we also have a lot of mandated um, by the university how to work with different people, Title IX, etc. That we do have to abide by. Um, I would not be shocked if there is a little bit more or that people might expect. But again, this was like revamped from a time that I wasn't even at our institution, and the people that have previously done it hadn't done it in a while. And my supervisor at the time, um, they had never actually done this either. So it was just kind of like, let's see what happens. Um, I will say that we all have background checks as faculty and employees at the institution. Um, when I have gone to a high school, I just had to, they had made me scan my driver's license and do a little bit of extra work there, but otherwise it wasn't anything too extensive or crazy. I don't know if that's helping with your question, but maybe I need to look into a little bit more information. I rely heavily on the instructors that come with them, with like the, emergency contact list, etc., that sort of thing. But thank you for your question.
I had mentioned the question about training
Mm.
for adults working with minors because we get nothing. And dual enrollment is now a quarter of our student population.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we have mandatory reporter training because everyone in Tennessee is a mandatory reporter at any of our public schools. So we do get that at my institution, but that's just everybody. We don't get anything specifically for dual enrollment. And it gives me some pause because I worry about parents and
Yes.
the things that we talk about and getting sued, stuff like that. So kind of freaks me out, I'm not going to lie.
What I can say, because I used to I used to be in charge of a lot of student workers. It's a great life, don't miss it. But one of the things that I learned in that aspect of being in libraries was that once a student is enrolled, they are technically, at least this was in DC, so it could change from state to state, they are technically, not to say like an adult, but they're responsible in an adult type way as a student. Um, and then FERPA comes in certain ways. So I think it was like your 16 and 17-year-olds, FERPA, they could technically choose if their parent did or didn't get access to their records, even at 16 and 17 years old. The biggest issue was for employment, they did have to be over 18 to not have that like sign off, etc. But FERPA laws do protect students as soon as they are technically enrolled in the institution. So if you are enrolled as a freshman, or I don't know how that works with dual enrollment, but I do know if you're a freshman and you're, say, 16, you are covered and you don't have a lot of the same reporting privilege. Like your parents don't have the same number of privileges, because I got yelled at quite a bit for that. Um, So yeah, and then someone in the chat did write about check with your local school district has parents sign a release for their kid in dual enrollment. That's a wonderful thing to think about too, for sure.
Any other questions or even comments?
I'll just apologize that my dog is fully asleep because it's raining and she loves the rain. Because typically she would be here right now and giving you all quite the treat. And then we have a FERPA applies to college, but they're likely sharing with the high school for sure. Thank you for sharing that.
I have done everything possible in my career to avoid dealing with parents.
It is, it is super wild to have them call like, why is this fine on my student's account? And then you tell them that you can't fight it, or you can't talk about it, and then you get yelled at for doing your job. Um, Again, don't miss it at all, for sure. But anyway, could the student access the GMU specific databases from their devices? Um, I'm assuming you were talking about like the open access items, or perhaps something different. Most of our databases, I will say, are locked and loaded with your NetID and password. Um, if it is open access, then I've had students, like I went to one of our high schools that's obviously not on our campus, and students were able to pull up any of the open access articles. It just did like a little like quick port and they were able to open it. Databases are super tricky because of vendors and all the rules that come with it. but we very heavily push the open access items that we do have. Someone in the chat wrote that when high school students or any guests come to campus, they can use any of our databases, but I show the high school students our state databases through 10Share. I don't believe at our institution, if they're on campus, they can also access the databases directly. I know there's a couple people from my institution, if you want to correct me in the chat, but I'd have had that pop up as an issue from their personal devices, but there were less issues if they used a school computer. And we don't have as many computers in the building because so many people use their own personal devices or would like unplug the monitor and plug their laptop into our monitor to have a dual monitor situation. I've seen that a couple times on my floor. It is a power move. I've definitely seen some institutions switch to having docking stations instead of desktops because they were like, well, they just want the monitor. So we'll just put the docking, like little docking station so they can plug in and have the monitor, which is great, but also wild. It has really been something to think about with because we don't have classroom laptop sets like the person in the chat was talking about. We don't have access to those. We only have so many computers in the library. So one of my big concerns when they came was like, will they even have a device? But most high schools hand out and sign out devices for the semester, for the year, which, the librarians at those campuses are the real MVPs because they have been given Chromebook duty of checkout, repair, and deal with it. So that was like a concern. One of the other presentations had mentioned, students trying to do things on their phone, and it's like, what if that's the only thing they have to do notes or to use the website? But at least with high school groups, they typically come with theirs. This summer, I am working with the early identification program because they have like a 3-week summer academy, and they worked with the schools to, I'm going to say quotes because I'll believe it when I see it, ensure that the students were able to keep their laptops logged or signed out over the summer for the EIP program because they need them, and we do not have them for them to use.